that is for life, and loving one another for life, and being together forever for life. And so we've started that. Last week we talked about what it truly means to love someone and to be able to be disciplined in our commitment to a person and what we base our marriage off of. And we looked at the idea of how many people base their marriage off feelings, which is very fragile, and feelings change from time to time. And so if you're building your marriage off of feeling, you're already starting on shaky ground. Instead, we should build our marriage off of the love of Christ. And in particular, model His relationship with His church in our relationship with a spouse. And how Jesus, in His love for us, sacrificed Himself for the good of the church. And so at the center, at the very core of our relationships, at the core of marriage, is the commitment to put someone else's needs, feelings, emotions, put their needs above my own. And to seek to try to serve them, as we talked about this morning. Serving and being servant of all. And yes, that includes my spouse. Serving and looking out for that person. So it's a disciplined commitment to seek the well-being of our spouse to an equal or greater level than that of our own. And so we want to work to give that person a better life than what we even want for ourselves. We want them to have that better life. But in this point of our lesson, we will be looking at and discussing the currency of love. The currency of love. Now, as you see, Brother Mike's name of this, he's the one that I got this series from. He's a preacher for the Churches of Christ up in Michigan, and he put this together, and I am using his material, but I really love this series. But the currency of love. What is the currency of love? The currency of love, first and foremost, is communication. It's communication, but we do want to give that better life to our partner. But communicating with one another and how we communicate this love, this currency of love in communication. Most of the time we would define communication just talking with one another. But that's not always how we communicate love. There's other ways that you can communicate love for someone, and it might not have anything to do with words, as we will see as we go on in our lesson. So the key in all this is love, but how do we communicate that love to our spouse, to that significant other? You'll also notice that as we go through this lesson, that you can also apply these principles to other relationships. Obviously, you want to show love in your friendships. You want to show love in the workplace. You want to show, we might change the word from love to appreciation. And people love to be appreciated. But there are different ways in which we can show that to someone. And it reminds me of a passage in 1 Corinthians 9, because not all people show love in the same way, but people also don't receive love in the same way. And I'm reminded of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 when he was talking about how he evangelizes to people and how he does it differently for certain folks. And he says in verse 19, he says, "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be partaker of it with you." So what Paul says here is he realized that there are different groups of people with different backgrounds, different beliefs, and they're on different locations as far as leading them to Christ. Now, there's always just the one way. John 14, verse 6, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But on that path to Jesus, on that path to salvation, you might find different people along the road. And then they're in different places. So you might find someone who doesn't even know a thing about Jesus. Well, you're not just going to come up to them and say, Jesus says for you to be baptized. Well, you can. But they're going to say, well, okay, but who is Jesus? And so obviously you wouldn't deliver the same message to someone who has never heard about Jesus as you would to maybe someone, in Paul's case, someone who was a Jew who already had Old Testament background, and someone who had already seen the life of Jesus, who had heard the teachings of Jesus. You would deliver a different message, or a different portion of the message, we might say, to that person than you would someone who didn't have any background or understanding of God or Jesus at all. And we understand that. And if you're going to correctly communicate to people, you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're speaking to. Well, much in the same way, if you're going to communicate love to your spouse, you need to know how they receive love. In which, how do they feel loved as a person? Now, there are many different ways that we can do this. And Gary Chapman, in his book called The 5 Love Languages, talked about these different languages, how we can communicate love to our spouse. Some people feel loved through words. Nothing makes them more loved than for someone to look them in the eye and say, I love you. To them, that is the greatest thing. You say, I love you, and it sends chills up their spines. And, I can really relate to this. This is probably one of my main ways of love language, is through words. And Jennifer and I have talked about this. We've read part of this book as well, and we've talked about the different love language. And I tried to relate to her that I feel loved when she tells me that she loves me. But you see, Jennifer has a different love language, okay? And hers is through actions and time. Oh, I'm also number 5 as well, but I like for her to be close to me. I like for her to hug on me and kiss on me. I like that. And that, that's me. But she needs her space more than I do. But she likes action. She likes for me to do things for her. For her, she tells me the greatest thing I can do is the laundry, the dishes, taking care of the kids, changing a diaper. That speaks to her. That says, you know what? He loves me. And I can tell her I love her all day long till I'm blue in the face, but it just doesn't speak as much as when I tell her through actions or when I give her my time. To her, she tells me that's when I really say I love you to her, not when I'm just telling her. But I'm more of the words. And, I love to hear that from her. I love for her to say, I love you. And, I really appreciate that when she does that. But we speak different languages, and there's the problem. You see, to me, when I tell her I love her, I am speaking love language. I'm showing her in my mind the greatest act of love I can give is for me to say, I love you. For me to tell her that I love her. Or to write her a poem. Or to write her a note. To me, that's a wonderful thing. But it just doesn't mean as much to her. And if I'm truly building this marriage and this relationship on putting her needs and her life even above my own, then I'm going to try to speak her language. I'm going to try to speak in the ways that she feels loved through actions. Now, she can go and do the same thing. She might do the dishes and clean up the house and do this or that. And she thinks back, she said, oh, he's going to love this. And then maybe I walk in the house and I don't even say anything about it. It just doesn't speak the same way to me. And so we need to see that. One, now you stop and think about it. You stop and think about your spouse. Or maybe you stop and think about your friends or even people at work. And maybe your love language isn't actions. But then you stop and think, you know what? That person at work, they come by and they help pick up the mess around my station. Or they come in and they bring me a coffee or something. Or they do this or that. That person is showing appreciation. That person is showing love. Maybe that's their love language. Or you think about your spouse and you think about, they don't really tell me they love me a lot. And I tell them I love them all the time, and they just kind of think like, okay. But then you stop and think, and you know what? Maybe actions is their love language. Maybe it's gifts. Maybe they're constantly giving me gifts. And that's their love language. And you think, maybe they have been telling me all these years that they love me. And I just didn't see it. I didn't realize it. But as we said before, you have to be able, in this communication, to just realize that, okay, one of these maybe, or two of these are in my top. But maybe they're not with my spouse. And this is where words do have to come into play. You have to talk to that person. You have to say something to them. You know, the preacher was talking about this today. What would you say out of those 5 things is your love language? And you might be surprised. You might have been married to this person or had some kind of relationship with this person for years, and you never knew that time was their love language. Or you never knew that gifts were their love language, or words. And you start to realize that. And we have this communication with others. We start communicating in this love language. And so it's not just saying with the words, I love you, or maybe it is. But we communicate these different ways and communicate our love in different ways. You think about Jesus in His life. He communicated His love to us through words. He came to this world and He told us He loved us. And He told everyone. And He told the world, I love you. But with that love, He also had sacrifice. He not only showed us His love through His words, but He showed it through His actions. Every time He stopped and He helped a poor beggar, or every time He stopped and helped this person who was outcast in life, whether they were poor or blind or maimed or deaf or whatever, and He stopped and He helped them and He showed compassion on them. He was showing love. Love to the world. And He didn't even have to say a word. And He showed that love. You think about Him dying on the cross for us and sacrificing His own life for our good. He didn't have to say a word. And that action alone showed His love for us. We need to understand that the language of love can be communicated in these many different ways and not just by words. But words, expressions of appreciation, of loyalty, of affection, of love or admiration, attraction. Those are words of love. Gifts. It's your tokens of love and appreciation. Things that you buy or things that you make. A card that it maybe is given to you by a spouse or a friend. It would be a gift. You can also see that as we go through these, that I can try these different areas of love, not only in my marriage relationship, but also with those I'm trying to reach for Christ. Maybe you tell these people all the time, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. I love you. I really wish that you would change your life. I really wish you'd let me tell you about Jesus. And all these words maybe are falling on deaf ears, when all along, if you would just maybe have given them a gift. Or maybe you should just give your time or do some kind of action or area of service. Maybe it's just that the person needs a hug. And that would warm and soften their heart more than anything. And so we think about this. We don't only limit it to our relationships as far as marriage, but we try to expand that. And we try to think about how we can use this knowledge to reach people for Jesus Christ. Think about those actions or areas of service. Actions to please and comfort another person in the home, the family, caring for people, taking care of other people's possessions, is a good action, that knowing that they can see and trust us with those things. Time, that is giving attention, and sometimes that can be a hard one for me, especially in giving attention to Jennifer when she's trying to tell me something or tell me a story or do that. My mind sometimes tends to wander, but I try to remember that if I can just focus and give her my attention, that's showing her that I love her in her mind. Quantity time, listening, watching, physical affections, touching, holding, intimacy as well between a married couple. As well, it shows that, again, love languages. And that's why sometimes you have maybe those situations in a marriage when it comes especially to, physical intimacy. To one person in the relationship, it means the world. It means the world. And maybe to another one, it doesn't mean that much. But remember, you're not thinking about yourself. You're not putting yourself first in this relationship. You're having the love of Jesus Christ in this relationship. And so that means you put another person's needs among your own. And so we may have a primary love language, a secondary love language, but we need to also keep in mind that we're not just pleasing ourselves in this issue. Some have said that usually when love dies, it is because we are no longer sure we love or are loved, because it is not being communicated to us in a way that we can feel it. And that's the difference. You may feel like, you have people in counseling, or you talk to someone as a friend, and they tell you things, that I just don't understand why they think I don't love them. I've been dedicating my life to them. I've been sacrificing, and maybe your love language is sacrificing for your spouse. And you think, I picked up the extra job on the weekend so that they could have more money to spend. I picked up this extra work. I picked up this extra shift. I did this so that I could provide for them more. And then they go and complain that I'm not doing anything for them, that I don't love them. Can't they see that I'm sacrificing so much? And you see, the language was different. The person was speaking love, but the other person didn't feel it because it wasn't their language. So we can express or receive all these things, but usually one of these is the one that convinces us that we are loved. And if it is not pressed, we will not feel loved, no matter what else the other person does or says. In other words, if you talk to me in my love language or language of love, then I will feel love. And so remember, again, those examples, and remember that this can spread and go even farther than just our love and our language in our relationships at home, but also in our relationships in the workplace, in school, with our friends, whatever it may be. So, again, some people want love, need love, desire to give love, but fail in love because they cannot seem to communicate it well. The answer for them is not to start loving. And maybe you realize that now, that my spouse doesn't need to start loving. It's just that we've been speaking the wrong language. We haven't been communicating well. I've been speaking one love language, and maybe she or he has been speaking another love language. So it's not that you have to start loving. They are already trying to do that. No, the answer is to love differently. I do not think people can change their basic personality. You don't have to do that. You simply just have to become aware of the other person's needs. Sometimes, you might be one of those natural touchy-feely kind of persons, and you're just not going to be able to turn it off all the time. But you need to realize that when you're doing that, you're not necessarily communicating the love that maybe your spouse needs. So we need to find those ways to communicate love for each other. We need to be totally honest with each other. And last, I want to leave you with this chart, and it's based off. It's not working, but it's based off a survey that was taken that talked about how. Okay, unless we're spoken to. Here we go. A hierarchy of needs. And this is how women and men rated their hierarchy of needs. And you'll see they're completely different in this. Women, most of them, at least in the survey, talked about affection, someone showing affection to them, attention, trust, financial security, involvement with the family, involvement with them. Then obviously you can see men's are different. Sensual fulfillment is the first thing that most men said. Someone that's going to be interested in the hobbies that they have. Apparently, a lot of men like that. They like when their wives are interested in the things that they're interested in. Attractiveness. They like it when their wives dress up and get pretty, and they like to show their wives off. Domestic support, support at home, showing confidence in the husband, showing confidence in him to provide and to lead. That's a big thing on men's list. Admiration as well, going along with that. But having that support and the admiration of their spouse. But you see that they speak differently, and we've got to learn that. Learn that men and women have these different needs, and we have different ways in which we can show that. We got to remember to have that mind of Christ, to put others before ourselves. We got to remember, even as Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, that I cannot treat all people the same. Some people are on different paths to the road to Christ, and so I have to start in different places. It may be that in my relationship, I have to realize that I've been trying to show love for so long. I've been trying to show it in this one way, and it was falling on deaf ears because that's not the way my spouse receives and gives love. We need to make sure that we are communicating, talking to one another about this. Also, if you're going to communicate the gospel to someone, you have to be willing to talk to them, find out where they're at, and then be able to lead them to Christ. You need to know and to ask them questions that will lead to a better understanding. We need to be clear in our communication. We need to practice good feedback methods. Communicating to be productive and complete. We must tell the truth. We must express it clearly and tell everything. It's going to take moments of honesty and truth in our relationships to build that good foundation. But once we start with this good foundation and we're speaking one another's love language, whether it be in the church, whether it be in our relationships to one another, or whether it be in the home, in the marriage, when we tell the truth, we seek to communicate with one another, and we seek to try to put other people before ourselves and speak their love language, then we can truly grow stronger together. We also want to make sure that tonight we are offering the invitation to someone. It may be that you are on the road that leads to salvation, and you just need to take that final step. You've heard the gospel, you've believed that Jesus is the Christ, you've repented of your sins, you've confessed your faith in Jesus, and you're ready to be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. And if that is the case, then we're here for you. We're here to help you with your relationship with Christ, to baptize you into Christ for the forgiveness of your sins. Or it may be that today you need to rededicate your life to God, to that relationship, to Jesus Christ who was your first love. Or it may be that today you are a husband or wife and you need to repent of sins. You need to be ready and willing to tell that person, I'm sorry if I haven't been speaking your love language all these years. And you're ready to communicate with them and to grow closer and even more in love than you have been before. Whatever your needs may be, we encourage you to come as together we stand as we sing.